I was manipulated into moving back home to care for my injured stepsister. When I left, my mom spread lies about me. Then I discovered a hidden trust fund and years of secret letters from my late stepdad. I'm Ruby, 26F, and I've had a complicated relationship with my family for as long as I can remember. My mother, Leah, 48F, never really wanted me. She got pregnant with me when she was 22, during a brief fling with my biological father. He left town as soon as he found out about the pregnancy, leaving Leah to deal with everything alone. Leah came from a strict religious family. When she told her parents she was pregnant and considering abortion, they were furious. They threatened to disown her if she went through with it. Feeling trapped and desperate, Leah reluctantly decided to keep the baby. Me. From my earliest memories, I could sense Leah's resentment. She'd often snap at me for small things, like spilling a drink or asking too many questions. When I was little, I thought all moms were like that. It wasn't until I started school and saw how other mothers interacted with their kids that I realized something was off in our relationship. When I was 4, Leah met Joseph, 50M, at her job. He was recently divorced with a 2-year-old daughter, Emily. Leah and Joseph hit it off immediately. Within 6 months, they were married and we all moved in together. I was excited at first. I thought maybe now I'd have a real family. Joseph was kind to me from the start. He'd read me bedtime stories, take me to the park, and praise my drawings. It was the first time I'd experienced that kind of positive attention from a parent. But Leah's attitude towards me didn't improve. If anything, having Emily around made things worse. Emily quickly became the favorite. Leah doted on her, buying her new clothes and toys while insisting we couldn't afford such things for me. If Emily and I fought, Leah always took Emily's side, even when Emily was clearly at fault. Joseph tried to treat us equally, but he worked long hours and wasn't around as much. As we grew older, the favoritism became more blatant. When I was 8, I won a spelling bee at school. I was so proud and couldn't wait to tell Leah. But when I got home, Leah barely glanced at my certificate before turning to Emily and gushing about how well she'd done in her dance recital the week before. My achievement was completely overshadowed. Emily picked up on Leah's attitude and started treating me badly too. She'd borrow my things without asking and return them damaged. She'd make fun of my clothes or hair in front of her friends. Once, when I was 10, Emily convinced her friends to exclude me from a neighborhood game, telling them I was weird and no fun. I spent the afternoon crying in my room while Leah told me to stop being so sensitive. Joseph did his best to make me feel loved. He'd take me out for special daddy-daughter days where we'd go to museums or try new restaurants. He attended every school event and cheered the loudest at my soccer games. But his support, while treasured, couldn't fully compensate for Leah's coldness and Emily's cruelty. When I was 14, I overheard a huge fight between Leah and Joseph. Leah was yelling about how unfair it was that she had to deal with someone else's mistake, meaning me, while Joseph got to be the fun dad. Joseph defended me, saying I was a great kid and Leah was being unreasonable. The fight ended with Leah storming out and not coming home for 2 days. After that, things got even tenser at home. Leah barely spoke to me except to criticize. Emily became bolder in her bullying, knowing Leah would always take her side. Joseph looked stressed all the time, caught between his wife and the stepdaughter he'd come to love as his own. The breaking point came when I was 16. I'd been saving up money from my part-time job to buy a laptop for school. I kept the cash hidden in my room. One day, I came home to find my savings gone. Emily was wearing a brand new designer jacket she definitely couldn't have afforded on her own. When I confronted her, Emily smirked and said, "Prove it." I went to Leah, certain that this time the evidence was too clear to ignore. But Leah accused me of lying to get Emily in trouble. She said I was jealous of Emily's new jacket and should be ashamed of trying to cause problems in the family. I ran to my room in tears. Joseph came to comfort me, and that's when the whole story came pouring out. Not just about the money, but everything I'd been bottling up for years. Joseph was horrified. He promised he'd talk to Leah and make things right. The next day, I came home from school to find Joseph and Leah in a heated argument. I paused outside the door, listening. That's when I heard Leah say the words that would change everything. I never even wanted her. My parents forced me to have her, and now I'm stuck with someone else's kid for the rest of my life. I must have made a sound, because suddenly they both turned and saw me standing there. The look on Leah's face wasn't even shame. It was annoyance at being caught. Joseph reached for me, but I ran out of the house. I spent hours walking around the neighborhood, trying to process what I'd heard. When I finally came back, Joseph was waiting up for me. He apologized profusely, saying he'd had no idea Leah felt that way. He promised things would change, but how could they? Now I knew the truth. My mother had never wanted me and saw me as nothing but a burden. After that, I withdrew from family life as much as possible. I focused on school, determined to get good grades so I could go to college far away. Joseph supported my efforts, even helping me apply for scholarships behind Leah's back. Leah didn't seem to care either way. I left for college with a sense of relief. Finally, I was free from the daily tension and emotional abuse. Joseph kept in touch regularly, calling to check in and visiting when he could. He paid for my tuition and living expenses, which I'm incredibly grateful for. Leah never asked how I was doing or offered to help financially. Last year, tragedy struck. Joseph and Emily were in a terrible car accident on their way back from visiting Emily's grandparents. Joseph didn't survive, and Emily was badly injured. I was devastated to lose the only real parent I'd ever had. I flew back for the funeral, but left right after without really talking to Leah or Emily. A month ago, Leah called me out of the blue. She apologized for how she treated me growing up and asked if I would move back home to help take care of Emily, who's still recovering and needs assistance. Leah said she was struggling to manage everything alone and needed support. I was shocked by the apology and request. Part of me wanted to say yes and try to finally have the mother-daughter relationship I'd always craved. But a bigger part of me was suspicious of Leah's sudden change of heart after all these years. I reluctantly agreed to come stay for a trial period to see how things went. When I arrived, Leah handed me a long list of chores and caregiving tasks for Emily. She expected me to do everything while she relaxed. Emily was as nasty as ever, constantly complaining and belittling me. The final straw came when Leah told me I'd need to pay $3,000 a month in rent to stay there. I was floored. She'd never mentioned anything about rent before. When I protested, Leah said if I was going to live there, I needed to contribute. I told Leah this wasn't what we'd agreed to, and I wouldn't be her live-in maid and nurse while also paying an exorbitant rent. She and Emily both blew up at me, calling me selfish and heartless for not wanting to help family. I packed my bags and left that day. Leah and Emily have been harassing me ever since, saying I'm abandoning them when they need me most. Extended family members have been reaching out to guilt-trip me as well. Part of me feels guilty for not helping, especially since Joseph always encouraged me to take the high road with Leah and Emily. But another part of me feels like this was just another manipulation tactic from Leah to get free labor and money out of me after years of emotional abuse. Aita for refusing to help them, even though they're struggling? Should I have stayed to honor Joseph's memory? I'm really torn and could use some outside perspective. Edit. Thank you all for the supportive comments. To clarify a few things, I have a good job in my own apartment. I'm financially stable and independent. Leah and Emily knew about my living situation when they asked me to move back. They framed it as coming home to help family, not as me needing a place to stay. Joseph left everything to Leah in his will. The house is paid off, so the $3,000 rent would have just been going straight to Leah. I offered to hire a part-time nurse to help with Emily's care, but Leah refused, saying, family should take care of family. Extended family reaching out don't know the full history. Leah has always presented herself as Mother of the Year to others. Update 1. It's been about a month since my original post. A lot has happened, so I wanted to give an update. After I left Leah's house, I blocked both her and Emily's numbers. I needed space to process everything. But they started reaching out to extended family members and friends to try to get to me. My Aunt Carol called me about 2 weeks ago. She said Leah had told her I'd shown up at the house uninvited, demanding money and a place to stay. According to Leah, when she refused, I ransacked the house looking for valuables and stormed out when I didn't find anything. I was furious. I told Carol the truth and sent her screenshots of Leah's texts asking me to come help. Carol was shocked. She said Leah had always portrayed herself as a devoted mother who I'd ungratefully abandoned. This was the first time Carol had heard my side. Carol started reaching out to other family members who Leah had contacted. As the real story spread, more relatives began calling me to apologize for believing Leah's lies. A few even shared stories of witnessing Leah's mistreatment of me when I was younger, but not saying anything at the time. It was vindicating but also opened up old wounds. One cousin, Rachel, told me about a family reunion when I was about 7. She remembered Leah snapping at me harshly for accidentally spilling a drink, then minutes later cooing sympathetically when Emily did the same thing. Rachel said she'd felt uncomfortable but didn't know how to intervene. My Uncle Tom recalled a Christmas gathering where Leah had lavished Emily with gifts, but only gave me a single clearly re-gifted item. He said he'd questioned Leah about it privately, but she'd brushed him off saying I was difficult to shop for, and ungrateful anyway. These stories brought back a flood of memories I'd tried to suppress. Like the time I got the lead in the school play, only for Leah to refuse to attend because it conflicted with one of Emily's soccer games. Or the summer Leah sent Emily to an expensive sleepaway camp while telling me we couldn't afford for me to go anywhere. The biggest bombshell came last week. My cousin Jake, who's a lawyer, called me. He said he'd been going through some of Joseph's old files and found a sealed envelope with my name on it. Inside was a letter Joseph had written to me shortly before he died. In the letter, Joseph said he'd always regretted not standing up to Leah more when I was growing up. He apologized for not protecting me better. The letter also revealed that Joseph had set up a trust fund for me that would mature on my 30th birthday. He'd kept it secret from Leah because he knew she'd try to contest it. Joseph wrote about how proud he was of me for persevering despite the difficult home environment. He said he'd always considered me his daughter in every way that mattered. Reading his words, I broke down crying. It was everything I'd always wanted to hear from him but never got the chance to. Jake is helping me get access to the trust fund information. We're not sure yet how much is in it, but even the fact that it exists means so much. It's tangible proof that Joseph truly loved me as his daughter. Leah must have found out about the trust fund somehow because she started leaving hysterical voicemails. She flip-flopped between begging me to share the money and threatening to contest it in court. I've saved all the messages in case I need them later. In one particularly unhinged message, Leah screamed that I'd stolen her husband's love and that the money rightfully belonged to her and Emily. She said I'd manipulated Joseph into setting up the trust fund and that she'd tell everyone what a conniving little snake I was if I didn't hand over the money. Emily also reached out via email. Her tone was completely different from before. Suddenly, she wanted to reconnect and heal our relationship. The email was full of reminiscences about happy memories we'd supposedly shared, most of which either never happened or glossed over her bullying behavior. I'm almost certain Leah put her up to it to try to get access to the trust fund money. I haven't responded. I'm feeling a mix of emotions right now. Relief that the truth is finally coming out. Anger at Leah's continued manipulations. Grief for Joseph and the relationship we could have had if he'd lived longer. But also hope for the future and gratitude for the gift he left me. I'm not sure what my next steps will be. Jake advised me not to make any decisions about the trust fund until we know all the details. For now, I'm focusing on healing and building stronger relationships with the family members who have apologized and want to make amends. Thank you all again for your support on my original post. It gave me the strength to stand my ground. I'll update again when I have more information about the trust fund situation. Update 2. It's been about 3 months since my last update. I wanted to share some final developments in this saga. Jake and I were able to access the details of the trust fund Joseph set up for me. It turns out to be a significant amount, enough to pay off my student loans and put a down payment on a house. I'm overwhelmed by Joseph's generosity and foresight in providing for me. Along with the trust fund details, we found more letters from Joseph. He'd written one every year on my birthday, detailing his pride in my accomplishments and his hopes for my future. Reading them was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. I treasured every word while mourning the years we'd lost. In one letter, written when I was 18, Joseph expressed his regret at not adopting me officially when he married Leah. He wrote that he'd brought it up several times, but Leah always had an excuse for why it wasn't the right time. Now I wonder if she deliberately prevented it to maintain the divide between Emily and me. Leah did try to contest the trust fund in court. She claimed that Joseph wasn't of sound mind when he set it up, and that I had somehow coerced him. Thankfully, Jake had found additional documentation from Joseph explaining his reasons for creating the trust. The judge dismissed Leah's case pretty quickly. During the court proceedings, some uncomfortable truths came to light. It turns out Leah had been secretly withdrawing money from Joseph's accounts for years, funneling it into a separate account for Emily. When confronted, Leah tried to justify it by saying she was just balancing things out, since Joseph spent so much on me. The judge was not impressed by this argument. After losing in court, Leah's tactics changed. She started showing up at my workplace and apartment, crying and begging for forgiveness. She said she'd realized how terribly she'd treated me and wanted a chance to make things right. One day, she cornered me in the parking lot of my apartment building. Through tears, she spun a story about how she'd been young and scared when she had me, and that her coldness was just a defense mechanism. She swore she'd always loved me deep down and wanted to start over. Part of me wanted to believe her, but I knew better than to fall for it again. I got a restraining order against Leah. It was a difficult decision, but necessary for my peace of mind. Emily has stopped contacting me as well, presumably realizing she won't get any money out of me. On a more positive note, I've been rebuilding relationships with other family members. My grandparents on my bio dad's side reached out after hearing what had happened. We had never been close before because Leah had poisoned that relationship too. Meeting them was surreal. I saw echoes of myself in their faces and mannerisms. They shared stories about my biological father, his childhood, his dreams, the mistakes he'd made. It didn't excuse his abandonment, but it helped me understand where I came from. They expressed deep regret for not being part of my life and asked for a chance to know me now. I've also grown closer to Aunt Carol and some of my cousins who have sincerely apologized for not seeing through Leah's lies sooner. We've had some hard but necessary conversations about the past. Carol confessed that she'd had suspicions about Leah's treatment of me, but convinced herself she was overreacting. She's promised to always believe me from now on. As for the trust fund, I've decided to use some of it to start a scholarship fund in Joseph's name for students who've overcome difficult family situations. I want his legacy of kindness to live on and help others the way he helped me. The past few months have been a roller coaster of emotions. Some days I feel strong and empowered, finally free from Leah's influence. Other days, the weight of everything I've lost. A loving mother, a childhood free from emotional abuse, more years with Joseph. Hits me hard. I'm taking things one day at a time. I'm learning to set healthy boundaries and surround myself with people who genuinely care about me. The road ahead isn't clear, but for the first time in my life, I feel like I have the freedom to choose my own path. I've started reconnecting with old friends from high school and college who I drifted away from during the years I was trying to please Leah. It's been healing to build those relationships again and create a support network of my own choosing. One unexpected development has been reconnecting with my childhood neighbor, Alex. He was a few years older than me and always looked out for me when we were kids. He'd invite me over to play video games when things were tense at home, or slip me snacks when Leah forgot to pack my lunch. Alex reached out after hearing about everything that had happened. We met for coffee and ended up talking for hours. He shared his own perspective on what he'd observed of my family dynamics growing up. It was validating to hear that even as a kid, he'd sensed something was off with how Leah treated me. We've been spending more time together lately. It's nice to be around someone who knew me before all this drama and sees me for who I really am. I'm not sure where things are headed with Alex, but for now, I'm just enjoying having him back in my life as a friend. As for Leah and Emily, I haven't heard from them since the restraining order was put in place. Part of me is relieved, but another part is still processing the finality of cutting ties with my only living parent, however toxic she may be. I'm trying to focus on the future and the possibilities that lie ahead. The trust fund has given me financial security I never thought I'd have. I'm considering going back to school for an advanced degree, something Leah always discouraged but Joseph supported. There are still hard days. Birthdays and holidays are especially tough without Joseph. But I'm working on creating new traditions and finding ways to honor his memory that feel authentic to me. Thank you all again for your support throughout this journey. Your advice and encouragement made a real difference in giving me the strength to stand up for myself. I'm cautiously optimistic about what the future holds.